who are darker than blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing, they all figure. A boy's grown up shoulders jigger.
Peace, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is Jacquie Luqman. It's Friday at 5 o'clock, so that means this is Darker Than Blue. Darker Than Blue, the show on WPFW, where we talk about politics for the people who you just heard Brother Curtis Mayfield say are darker than blue. That's me and you, y'all. Hey, thank you so much for joining this Friday. It is September 12th. There is so much going on, but I have been wanting to have this conversation with my guests today because there is something going on in the struggle for Palestinian liberation and in the struggle for this country adhering to its own alleged laws and international laws that people didn't know a lot about, that I was very, very glad that I was able to participate in. And that is, it's two things. And one thing I participated in and the other thing I'm not able to, but we're going to talk about both because we're talking about how we take this struggle out of the streets. Not that we're not in the streets, folks. This is not what I'm saying. I am not saying that we should not be in the streets. I am saying that in every organized effort for liberation, there is a thing we call a multiplicity of tactics. You've probably heard me say it before. And it's very, very important because you know how I say all the time, y'all, that we all have a role in the revolution. There is room for all of us. There is a role that all of us have to play, regardless of what your skills are, lack of skills, your perceived lack of skills. Because I promise you, y'all are not skillless. Every day, people do amazing things with their talent, with their consciousness, with their time, with their effort. And you don't realize how creative and dedicated to things that are important to you that you are. So a lot of people don't realize that they can be organizers. They can organize in actual structured organizations. They're probably just intimidated because a lot of you probably think we're looking for hyper super revolutionary people right now. No, we're just looking for people who are concerned about where we are and want to go in a different direction. And that means that we get a lot of people in our organizations who are not exactly on the entire same page we are on, although we make it clear, we in the Black Alliance for Peace, make it clear what our principles are up front. So when you join the Black Alliance for Peace, or if you want to participate in events that we have, you should go to our website and look at our principles of unity and look at our code of conduct and these kinds of things, because that's where we align. This is where people know, oh, this is what these folks stand for. And I agree with that. And I want to be a part of that or not. And that's okay. But the point is that there is a place, there is a role, there is a job and some work for everybody across the spectrum of skills and talent, or whatever you want to call it, in revolution. And the people that I'm talking to today, I think, are a great example of what that can look like. Because as you see on my screen, I am joined by Seth Donnelly, who is one of the organizers for Taxpayers Against Genocide. Have you heard of this grassroots group of folks? I'm pretty sure most of you have not, which is why I felt like it was so important for us to talk about this, because Taxpayers Against Genocide are responsible for filing what I believe, and Seth, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, and we have another guest that I'm going to introduce also, but Taxpayers Against Genocide has filed the only lawsuit in the country against the United States government for the misappropriation of taxpayer resources to fund genocide, which is in violation of U.S. law and international law. So, Seth, is that correct?
Yeah, that's how we started. And let me just say, too, from the heart, what an honor it is to be on your program, Jackie. I've had the opportunity to we've connected as comrades and multiple times in the streets and for actions, and so much appreciate you and your work. So yeah, we started as a grassroots movement in Northern California, where I'm based, and we launched a huge class action lawsuit against our congresspeople for funding the genocide in Gaza. This was a year ago, exactly about a year ago that we filed it. And I think you're correct. It was the only class action lawsuit against Congress for illegally using our tax dollars to fund genocide. And we knew that it was an uphill battle, to say the least, because the court system had already made previous rulings, the federal court system shutting down. There was a previous lawsuit by Palestinian American families represented by the Center for Constitutional Rights, where they filed against the Biden administration for genocide and got shut down. About 10 years earlier, there was a lawsuit filed by the Rachel Corrie's family and family members of Palestinians who had been killed by IDF soldiers driving Caterpillar bulldozers, and that had been shut down. And in all those cases, they said that the court said, we don't make foreign policy, we don't get involved when it comes to the other branches, policies of the other branches of government. And since Congress bought the bulldozers, and since the Biden administration is involved in Palestine, we're going to sit this one out. We knew we were up against that precedent, but we hoped that since we were coming at from the angle as taxpayers, that this is our money that's funding this genocide, that this is very domestic, that we might be able to crack through that. But of course, we didn't. And so consequently, rather than backing down, we're organizing with thousands of taxpayers across the country to go after the United States on an international level. And so that sets the stage for working with Huwaida.
And I thank you for that perfect segue into introducing my other guest, and that is Huwaida Arraf, who is the lead attorney for this lawsuit. And Huwaida, you are also the founder of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. And we're going to talk about the Freedom Flotilla Coalition in a few minutes. But I would love, Huwaida, for you to talk about your role as the lead attorney in this lawsuit. What is in the lawsuit? I know you can't provide all of the details, but tell people listening what's in this lawsuit and why you're the lead attorney, how you got involved.
Great, thank you. Let me just echo Seth in saying what an honor it is to be here with you. I should also correct that I wouldn't say I'm the founder of the Freedom Flotilla lawsuit. We are, as you talked about, everyone has a role, and I was one of many people, and I still am just honored to be working with so many fabulous people around the world in this global movement and uprising for Palestinian liberation. And as you noted, the struggle takes many forms, and we just have to figure out what we can do from where. And I'm a longtime activist, and then I became an attorney to try to learn and implement, strategies and tactics to find justice for victims of human rights abuses and to hold the worst criminals, war criminals, accountable. And then learned a lot about the law, which we don't have to go into now, but in terms of its effectiveness. And in the end, we know that law is just one of many tools that we use. But in that, being kind of an activist lawyer, I'm very active with the National Lawyers Guild. And TAG reached out to the National Lawyers Guild for support in their domestic lawsuit. And so I offered to try to help and advise. One of the reasons being that I knew it was almost impossible to pursue this kind of lawsuit domestically, because the United States has virtually immunized itself from any kind of accountability. As Seth was talking about, there's what's called the political question doctrine, in which the courts say this is, we can't sit in judgment of things that fall into the realm of the executive, and especially when it comes to foreign policy. That's where we see the political question doctrine the most. But there's also another part of the law that really immunizes our members of Congress for things that they say, decisions that they take that have to do with their job as a legislator. And so you really can't sue them for even some really egregious things that they say and do, as long as they can say it's part of their job as a legislator or representative. So we had those issues, and indeed, as Seth mentioned, the court shut down the lawsuit. And so we decided that because we cannot get justice domestically, that we will go international. And one of the things that TAG did is also file a what's called a shadow report with the United Nations. But as we see, the United States this year is not participating in what's called the periodic review. Every 4 years, each country is reviewed for their human rights record, and the Trump administration announced that they are not participating this year. But TAG submitted through some lawyers a report there, and what we did is submit a complaint. It's not necessarily a lawsuit. It is officially a complaint or a petition to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And the Inter-American Commission is one of 2 judicial bodies in the Inter-American system in the Organization of American States, which the United States is a part of. And being a part of the Organization of American States, every country, the United States is not exempt, has obligations, human rights obligations that are listed in what's called the American Declaration. It's the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man. And these are basic fundamental rights: the right to life, to an education, to family, not to be tortured, not to be disappeared, to have due process. There are a long list of rights. And what we are arguing in this complaint is that the United States is violating almost all of them, almost all of their human rights obligations in this context under the American Declaration, but also violating international law and what we call jus cogens, norms of international law. These are norms that really cannot be derogated from. They are considered so fundamental in the law that there is no excuse ever for derogating from them. And the United States, in what it's doing, which is enabling, not only enabling, but really participating in Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. It is participating in a genocide, and of course, that violates all kinds of laws. So we are actually arguing 2 different things. The United States is violating these jus cogens, norms of international law. They're violating their obligations under the Inter-American Human Rights System and the American Declaration, and they're also violating their obligations under other human rights, international human rights instruments. And there's also the what's called the Genocide, the Genocide Convention. So there's a lot there. And we're representing Taxpayers Against Genocide, but also Palestinian American taxpayers and Palestinian Americans who have been forced to watch their families being starved and slaughtered and know that they are paying for it with their tax dollars.
Seth, I want to ask you, and thank you, Huwaida, for that explanation and for explaining to people that there are bodies of jurisprudence, I guess, if we want to call it, that exist outside of U.S. courts that the U.S. is connected to and involved in. And it's I don't even know how to feel about the fact that this court that this complaint was filed in is connected to the Organization of American States, which is that's such as an anti-imperialist, they're akin to the devil. But if there can be some movement on holding this government accountable for the misuse and misappropriation of taxpayer resources in the commission of violations of human rights that this government agreed to be a part of the OAS, then this goes right back, Seth, to the multiplicity of tactics that I talk about a lot and that we talked about at the top of the show. So can you tell people, like, why didn't you all just give up after the U.S. courts shut the lawsuit, the complaint down, didn't respond to it, threw it out? Why didn't you all just give up?
Yeah, well, for sure. And I will definitely answer that. But just to also, because I share TAG and myself personally, and TAG, we share the anti-imperialist politics. We're in alignment with very much respect and admire the politics of Black Alliance for Peace, Palestinian Youth Movement, Red Nation, many orgs that are driving forth the position of genuine anti-imperialism. And we see the contradiction with the OAS, like you just mentioned, right? But our position is, if we can use that instrument, the Inter-American Commission, to direct energies against the United States for its role in the genocide in particular, and also raise anti-imperialist awareness with masses of taxpayers, because we're also organizing, TAG has like 5 principles which are grounded in anti-imperialism. And so everybody, in fact, our first lawsuit went only after Democrats, because those were the politicians that were in our area of California. So it's not like the Democrat versus Republican. It's a more genuine anti-imperialism. Anybody who's participating in advancing empire and genocide in Palestine, we're united against. And of course, we also are aware of genocide occurring in other quarters of the world, like the slow motion genocide that's happening due to U.S. imperialism in Haiti.
That's right.
So this is what the politics we're trying to develop in a mass way with ordinary taxpayers, many of whom are already frustrated at high rates of taxation as working class people and little to see for it in their own lives. And then when they start seeing more and more that their taxes are paying for 2,000-pound bombs in Palestine, and 800 military bases around the world, etc., it actually, I think, has real potential to activate. But to answer your question, we didn't want to give up because we had mass momentum. By that time, the class action lawsuit hit a nerve with people across the country. So we had hundreds of people reaching out across the country saying, I want to go after my congressperson too, whether it's Fetterman in Pennsylvania or Schumer, etc. And as Huwaida said, we became increasingly aware, especially with the guidance of her and the NLG attorneys, that as much as we wanted to sue these guys, it was they had the U.S. Constitution and its system pretty much insulates them. But we didn't want to give up, and there's a tremendous radical potential in focusing on the U.S. as a driving force of this genocide. We know that Netanyahu, of course, is culpable, but they couldn't do it for a day without the U.S. And so until we actually deal with we're in the belly of the beast, and until we actually deal with the source problem, and as George Jackson said a long time ago in Blood on My Eye, the U.S. is a problem in the Congo, and the U.S. is a problem in Haiti, the U.S. is a problem in Pine Ridge, the U.S. is a problem in Lakota land. So until we actually deal with the source of it, it's going to keep mutating and occurring. I've seen it my whole 55 years of my life. I've seen it, this kind of constant assault on humanity by the system that I live in.
That is amazing, and the idea, I think, of using an effort like this to not just pursue justice outside of a system where that's not ever going to be allowed, and the reason the system in this country is set up this way is because they never wanted to be held accountable for any of the imperialist, evil, genocidal things that they established this country on. This is something that I think over the past 2 years, Seth and Huwaida, that for organizers like myself, this is a fact that we have probably gone into triple overtime trying to explain to people this brutality, this barbarity, this support of violence and depravity and genocide, quite literal genocide. This is not new. This is not a unique modern thing in this country. And I think that the fact that you both just explained that U.S. politicians are protected by laws that they passed to keep us, U.S. alleged citizens, from ever holding them legally responsible for violating other laws that they passed to keep them from using U.S. resources in the pursuit of the violation of human rights, in the commission of war crimes, in the commission of genocide. So the fact that, you know, we think all the time that only police have qualified immunity. No, you two are sitting here telling us
Yeah.
that the U.S. Congress has qualified immunity from U.S. citizens filing lawsuits, holding them civilly responsible for stealing and misappropriating our money to go and kill people around the world. That
right.
is wild to me, that we're also getting a lesson right now through this effort in the idea that the US government has insulated itself with a giant qualified immunity clause. Huwaida, isn't that kind of accurate?
Yeah, pretty much so, within our own domestic court system and really internationally. So I think something else that has to be said, if when we look at the international tribunals kind of that exist, we have two big ones that people may have heard about. There's the International Court of Justice, and that adjudicates disputes between states for violations of treaty obligations. And we have South Africa that took Israel to the court for violating the Genocide Convention. You know, even though the United States is signatory to the Genocide Convention, it has a reservation on jurisdiction. So basically, it says that no country can take it to the International Court of Justice unless it agrees. So it put in a reservation on jurisdiction. So that makes it almost impossible to go there. And then there's the International Criminal Court, which the United States did not sign the Rome Statute. Of course, that still the court can have jurisdiction over criminals and over states, or over officials, because it's over individuals from countries that are not signatory in a number of ways. And the court already ruled that it has jurisdiction over crimes being committed in Palestine. So US officials actually should be able to be held accountable. But of course, the United States is kind of the world bully, and it exercises its influence and throws away around its financial weight and other things to make sure that it's not, and other countries wouldn't dare try to hold US officials accountable. And now what we see is that this administration has actually sanctioned the court and sanctioned people who are working with the court. So in February, they sanctioned the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Then they followed up with sanctions against judges. Then they sanctioned the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese, because she is talking about Palestinian rights and violations thereof and collecting evidence. And so she is also working and supporting the court. And then most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, 3 very prominent Palestinian human rights organizations that for decades have been doing such critical work documenting the violation of Palestinian rights, not only by Israel, but also by the Palestinian Authority. And in this time, especially when Israel is not allowing into Gaza journalists or attorneys or others, the work of these organizations that have been sanctioned is critical because they are documenting these rights violations. But US sanctions, doesn't only affect these organizations when they do things here in the United States, it's global. It affects their ability to do any kind of global financial transaction. So it really cripples their work. So that is the United States not only kind of immunizing itself here, but also globally, and then bullying institutions that do exist to try to achieve accountability and justice for victims of rights abuses. And even with the inter-American system that I was talking about, we filed our complaint to the commission. There's a commission and there's a court. The commission can adjudicate and it will issue its findings and recommendations. But sometimes you have states that don't follow, and then there's a court. Then it could be elevated to the court. Now, the United States does not recognize the jurisdiction of the court.
Of course not.
So again, no, it's not. So it says, okay, we'll participate with the commission, and you can issue findings against us, but we don't have to listen. But that's, we find that a lot in a lot of the things we do. As you mentioned, the United States has its own laws that it's violating, but that's why it works together with the activism, the movement in the streets, things that so many others are doing. So this is not in and of itself, going to be the thing that holds the U.S. accountable, but it works in hand with so many other things that people are doing.
And just to throw in one thing real fast, Jacquie. Like with this sort of emerging mass movement that we're we're part of, any ruling by the commission is a stepping stone for us as a movement. We're not stopping until we want to see criminal prosecution of these officials.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very clear that this is an important stepping stone. It's the mechanism in the Americas, and but it's not the end of the line. We're really having to tackle dedicated to tackling U.S. impunity.
Yeah, absolutely. We're creating a record, and and a ruling by the commission will be very consequential and hold a lot of weight with these, different other human rights, other judicial bodies and human rights organizations and institutions, and of course, what we do with it publicly. In terms of the United States always presenting itself as this, bastion of human rights and democracy and whatnot. Of course, I think a lot of people now see the truth, but this will be another element to show that the United States, here's this judicial body that actually made findings that United States is violating all of these rights that they're obligated to uphold, and that they're also violating their obligation to prevent genocide, and they're actually complicit in genocide.
Yeah, Huwaida, I want to ask you before we talk about the flotilla, is the United States the only government in the world that has this kind of a legal insulation from accountability in this way? Are there other countries that are part of these bodies that then turns around and says, okay, but you can't hold us, you don't have any jurisdiction over us?
Well, I can't say that I will be able to answer it definitively, because I don't know all the other countries in the world do. And certainly there are other authoritarian countries that have horrific human rights records. But the United States, as being, quote unquote, a Western country that promotes itself as a defender and a promoter and the founder, of modern day democracy, human rights, etc., it is one of the worst. When you look at European countries, for example, they have a lot more respect for regional and international judicial bodies and their obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law. That is not to say that they don't violate, but they respect more. Most of Europe is signatory, for example, to the Rome Statute and party to the International Criminal Court. They give a lot of respect and deference to the International Court of Justice. The United States, when it comes to its own record and Israel and supporting Israel, has been, not only sanctioning, but also publicly trying to undermine. So you find that in terms of, again, quote unquote, these Western states that promote themselves as these examples of democracy, the United States is the worst.
Yeah. Oh,
and the United States in the world, actually, many people might not know this, but it is one of the countries in the world that has signed on to the least number of international human rights treaties. There are so many treaties that are standard and that are considered just fundamental to international law. And the United States had, like, on the rights of women and so many other treaties, again, that the United States has not signed on to. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is amongst the 5 in the world that has the worst record in terms of its, signing on and adhering to these international treaties.
No,
Oh,
sorry, I just had another question, Seth, that I just thought of. State legislatures, can they be sued? State politicians, mayors, city council members, can they be sued? Do they have the same immunity as congressmen have?
That's a really good question. And what Huwaida was talking about, it's this clause in Article 1 of the Constitution, the speech, I believe it's the speech or debate clause, where it's, like Huwaida was saying, legislative activity is considered protected free speech. So, here they are using our tax dollars in violation of international law, federal law, to fund genocide, and yet they're trying to claim that that's an issue of free speech and that they have immunity. I still think that that's something worth really interrogating further. But, right now our focus is clearly international. Whether or not state legislatures can make that same claim, I don't know. Huwaida, any thoughts from you on that?
I have not looked at the case law on terms when it comes to kind of local representatives and state representatives, but I think that they would be subject to the same kind of immunity. Again, when it comes to members of Congress, we are talking about the foundations of that being in the US Constitution, but I think there would be similar. I just haven't looked into that, to be honest.
That would be my guess. It would carry over, right?
Again, when it has to do with their legislative activities, of course, if they are committing crimes that, you know, like bribery or blackmail or things like that, yes, they can be held accountable. That would be more criminal. And there are other small exceptions. And of course, we would argue that funding genocide is a crime, but that's not just how our law sees it.
Right. Yeah. The actual morality and law are two completely different things. And I really need people to understand that that's the situation here. The laws in this country, not based on morality, based on capitalism and imperialism, and protecting and upholding those ideals. Now I want to ask about the flotilla, because that is another, I think, really important and I will admit it's exciting, it's dynamic. I don't think it's something I've seen before, but I'm 57, so I haven't always been as politically in tune to everything going on. So I'm sure this has happened before, but I don't think I've seen the level of engagement that we see now, because now the Samud flotilla is on its way to Gaza, the largest in the world. I think the largest flotilla that has ever existed. Is it 50 boats from 44 countries? Huwaida now, and I have to ask, because people are asking, these are conversations that we're having. Why do the flotilla? What do people who are participating in the flotilla think they are going to accomplish? Why do it?
Okay, so there's a lot there. Yes, you are correct in that this is not new. In fact, the first boat I was on to try to break Israel's siege of Gaza was in 2008. I'm sad to say, almost 18 years ago, when Israel imposed its criminal blockade. Now, Israel has always controlled Gaza, and the lives of the people living there, Palestinians in Gaza are living under a brutal occupation. But in 2006, Israel imposed this blockade that was meant to be a form of punishment because it didn't like the outcome of Palestinian elections, or so it said. But we know that throughout, for decades, Israel has been imposing these policies on Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, that is intended to make their lives miserable so that they leave. Israel is a settler colonial project, and in order to realize the goal of the settler colonial project, they have to get rid of the indigenous Palestinian population, and those that they don't get rid of, they have to dominate them. And this is what Israel's policies have been. Over the past 2 years in Gaza, we've seen an accelerated attack on Palestinian civilians. In this effort, Israel's not even quiet about it anymore, to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. It's killing as many as it can now, and it will try to ethnically cleanse the rest. And it is, so back in 2008, we tried to break Israel's criminal blockade, and we were actually able, two small fishing boats, to get into Gaza in 2008 a few times, but then Israel started attacking us. And it actually, in 2010, we had a huge flotilla with 700 people on it. And Israel attacked that flotilla and killed 10 of our colleagues, 10 of our volunteers, including an American citizen that the US government not only did nothing for, but when the family of this young, he was a 19-year-old Turkish-American student, the family tried to bring a lawsuit against Israeli officials in US courts. The US government intervened to get the court to throw it out, saying Israel is immune, even when it comes to killing American citizens. I was an American citizen on an American flagged boat in that flotilla, and Israel attacked us, it brutalized us, it tortured us, and we tried to bring a lawsuit that Israel attacked a US boat, which is US territory in international waters, and the government again opposed us and asked the court to throw it out. So it has been very hard to get any kind of justice for what's the crimes that Israel is committing. But we continue to try legally, and we also mobilize on the ground in all of the ways that there has been mobilization around the world. One of the ways is that the flotillas have also been continuing. And for a long time, people probably didn't hear much about them. But with the genocide happening now and people becoming more aware and people being frustrated in terms of trying to figure out what can we do, I think the idea of sailing to try to break Israel's naval blockade has captured people's attention and imagination. And I was on a boat just less than 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. We were carrying baby formula for children in Gaza that Israel is deliberately starving, and Israeli commandos, naval commandos, attacked our boat. And the attacks on our recent boats this year has sparked other movements now to also get boats. And we see now dozens of boats that are at sea. And so we will keep trying, but it's inspiring because we are, I think, living in this time where Israel and the United States, and joined by other countries, of course, are trying to tell us that we, the people, and what we think and what we want and human rights, all of that doesn't matter. What matters is brute military might. And this is a world in which no one is safe. And this is a battle, I would say, that we can't let those forces of violence win. And so seeing this kind of mobilization is, I think it's exciting, it's encouraging, and we need to just keep on.
Yeah, especially since when you're watching, well, when I watched some of the coverage online of the flotilla coming into Tunis, and which the Israeli government has now bombed some of the vessels in Tunis. So Israel is bombing yet another country.
Yeah.
People in yet another country. But to see the excitement of people welcoming the flotilla into their country and sending them along to Gaza with well wishes and just really being the ideological and emotional wind that pushes these boats to Gaza to help save the lives of people being starved to death in a genocide. Again, this, Seth, it is just another example of a beautiful way to show the multiplicity of tactics can be as creative as we need them to be. I would have never thought of getting on a boat and sailing to try to break a naval blockade against another country. But the fact that somebody did, that somebody with more resources than I have, because of course I wouldn't think about getting on a boat because I don't have one. So, right. And sometimes I think it's just that simple. We think of ways to struggle within the confines of our material conditions. We think of ways to fight with what we have in front of us, right? So of course there are some things that we wouldn't think of, but I am glad, Seth, that somebody with more resources than we have thought, you know what, I can use this for something good. I can use this, maybe I can use this to save some lives. And then the idea caught on. And more people with those resources said, yeah, let's see if we can do that. And it just continues. And I think, Seth, this is the beauty of multiplicity of tactics, because we don't have to. And I do believe that these two efforts, which now I hope people see are not separate from the larger struggle for liberation for Palestine and from capitalism and imperialism for the world, and not disconnected from the complaint. The flotilla is not disconnected from the larger struggle. It is all a part of one thing. I think this really does show that even in carrying out the multiplicity of tactics, we don't have to sacrifice or compromise our principles.
That's right.
So what's next, Seth, for Taxpayers Against Genocide, for the flotilla, for this movement? What's next?
Well, speaking for TAG, and I have just major admiration for the incredible work Huwaida has done and others who risked their lives on the flotillas. But, I've been thinking a lot about, and I'll keep this short because I know we're running out of time, but I've been thinking a lot about George Jackson lately, because we just went through Black August, and I was rereading his book, Soul of Dead Brother and Blood in My Eye, had a huge influence on my political development when I was a teenager. And one of his essays, I think it's in Blood in My Eyes, is Towards United Front. And I think TAG is one stream. Obviously, it's a small stream, but it's a growing stream of thousands of taxpayers that seeks to connect with other organizations like Black Alliance for Peace, Palestinian Youth Movement, many different orgs, to create this kind of united front to oppose fascism. And when I say fascism, I don't mean all of a sudden like the United States is fascist because of Trump. I agree with Margaret Kimberly and the analysis that George Jackson put forward in 1971 that fascism's most advanced form it's already been here.
That's right.
And we can go back to what you said in DC in May, that there's a through line from the We Charge Genocide petition that William Patterson filed in 1951 with the United Nations against the U.S. for genocide against the Black nation to and all the indigenous work by the Lakota Nation and other indigenous nations, particularly dealing with international law in the 70s. So this is just one extension of this, but what we're trying to do is hit that nerve with masses of taxpayers. So I see us keeping to build. We want all listeners to go to taxpayersagainstgenocide.org. It's a real easy website to remember. Join TAG. With that, we want to try to get, we're filing this complaint imminently. But even when we file it with the commission, we're going to keep building and getting thousands of people to sign on before we hopefully can get a hearing or some kind of process in place. So please go to taxpayersagainstgenocide.org, join. If you want to organize in your areas, like there's now people in New York organizing a TAG chapter in Texas. And so reach out to us. But having said all that, the big thing is we want to be a stream in a united front. A river of united front of people power, because that's the only thing that's going to stop this is people power. We see this as a tactic, like you said, but not performative. A real this complaint that Huwaida has been working on it's huge, and we really encourage listeners to read it once it's released.
Huwaida, how about you?
Well, we have no choice but to keep on. And what I frequently say, especially with all of the wonderful people who I've had the honor to work with, both kind of on the legal front and in global activism, is hopefully someday we will be working together and uniting in positive times, and not when we're kind of fighting a genocide and these horrors. But the first wave for the flotilla, the first wave is at sea right now, and it certainly won't be the last. There is another wave coming right after that, and another wave after that. And so we will not stop trying to break the blockade. And legally, even though we've been shut down in US courts, I mean, that doesn't mean that we're not trying. And I'm in touch with lawyers and also kind of myself exploring also new avenues. There's just so many crimes and so much evidence. But we're also kind of overwhelmed in terms of, again, how much there is, because, on one hand, we're trying to keep our families and loved ones and people alive, but also trying to fight the structures that enable what's happening. And it's a lot. I hope that one thing I say to people is, it's easier said than done, but let's try not to be overwhelmed, because that's what they want to do to us, overwhelm us with how horrible and the gravity of the situation is. But if we can find times and places and just opportunities to lift each other up and know that we are in this good fight, and one that we, again, absolutely have to win, and finding our place in what we can do every single day, then we keep on that way. And it's positive. And as bleak as things look now, I'm very optimistic More people are waking up. More people are waking up. And now what I think we need to do is to make sure that they don't feel disempowered. They feel like there is some place for them in this global movement, not just for Palestine. It's Gaza and Palestinians today, but it's really for all of us, all of our liberation, as we've been talking about in this global fight. So the boats will keep going. The legal action will keep going. We'll keep marching in the streets, and we will win. We will win.
We will win.
We will win until liberation. Thank you so much, Seth Donnelly, Huwaida, Arraf, Taxpayers Against Genocide. I appreciate you. I celebrate you. And man, I am looking forward to the celebration we will have when we do win. And then we start building the society that we want and that we deserve. Thank you so much for joining.
You,
hey, we got to take a little break now, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Such an honor.
Thank you. Thomas Sankara. Right on.
Indeed. And you know, I'm a little bit over my time. Thank you for your patience, my engineer extraordinaire. But you know, we've got a WPFW station break that we have to do. So what's on tap for the people today?
WPFW family, the fun begins on Saturday, September 13th at the WPFW 5K Run Walk for Total Fitness from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. In addition to the 5K, fitness and wellness classes such as Tai Chi, line dancing, breath work, double dutch, and more will be offered along with music to fuel your participation. There is something for everyone to enjoy. This event takes place at the Bladensburg Waterfront Park, 4601 Annapolis Road in Bladensburg, Maryland. Details are available at WPFWFM.org or 202-888-5484. WPFW, building a better world, one broadcast at a time.
All right. Thank you so much. That sounds like a lot of fun. There's always really good stuff going on here at WPFW. We do the jazz, and PFW is so good at jazz. And y'all know, we here in the DMV area, we never actually call the station by the whole 4 letters. It's just PFW. We always leave the W out because you know that's how we do. That's our AAVE. But PFW has always had an amazing a lineup of programmers who are just excellent curators of jazz and excellent purveyors also. Just the amount of musical history and information that they themselves consume, and then they come on this station and share it with the world for free. This is our personal time. That nobody is paying the programmers here on WPFW to do the work we do. We're just really, really passionate about the things that give us energy, that fill our hearts, that make our souls sing. And I love that it's not just with jazz or blues, because if you're not listening to Don't Forget the Blues on Saturday, you are missing. You're missing. Or Sophie's Parlor, the music of women vocalists and musicians. Just wonderful selection. Hip hop, go-go, Fridays. If you're not listening to Bobby Rocks on Fridays, you're missing out on getting a head start on a feel-good weekend, right? But WPFW also makes space for people like me. People who, I love music, but it doesn't give me that fire in my heart, that fire in my belly, that passion, that fighting for justice for all people gives me. WPFW gives us this amazing balance of culture and creation of a society that is better than the one we live in. And I think it's a really beautiful thing that we get to, even in the midst of what has to be the most horrific thing that I have probably experienced in my lifetime, going on for 2 years, where I literally know people who have been personally impacted by this genocide. Because when I think about it, when the Rwandan genocide happened, I was in middle school, maybe, and I didn't entirely understand what was going on. And I'm not even sure I understood what genocide was, but I knew it was very bad. And I knew I was very angry at Bill Clinton for doing nothing at the time, because, you know, those are people who were being massacred and everybody knew it was wrong and nobody did too much about it in the US government, except for give the people who were doing it money. And the people who were doing it, by the way, are now running. They're not now in charge of Rwanda, and are now trying to do the same thing in Congo with the help of Israel. Oh, you didn't know that Israel is deeply implicated in what's going on in the Congo and in a few other African countries. In Haiti, yes, they are. So now here we are 2 years into a live streamed genocide. And I understand now so much more than I understood when I was in middle school during the Rwanda genocide. And as dark and as bleak as Huwaida just said, as the times are, living in the midst of this every day, waking up to more of it, turning on social media and seeing more content, wanting to turn it off, but knowing that I cannot, because I must bear witness to this incredibly dark moment in history. Because the thing that drives me is that I can't turn away. I refuse to turn away, because humanity and uplifting humanity is important to me as a human being, as an individual, as a Christian, as a liberation theology follower of Christ, as an African, as a socialist, as a woman. So WPFW is giving me the opportunity to share my passion for justice, for peace, for liberation, for Africans, for the global South, for everyone in the world, from capitalism, imperialism, from Zionism, and all of their connected degradations imposed upon working class, poor peasant people around the world. But WPFW also gives you, listeners, the opportunity to hear perspectives on these issues that you are not going to hear on CNN, MSNBC, whatever MSNBC is calling itself now. I don't even know, and I don't even care. You're not going to hear it on Fox News. You're not going to hear it on NPR. You're going to hear on WPFW not just a multiplicity of opinions about these issues, these pressing, critical, life-impacting issues that we are all looking at and faced with today. But as you heard today from my friends Seth and Huwaida, you will also hear from those different perspectives a multiplicity of tactics that will give you an opportunity to sit there and think about, oh, this is something that I didn't realize was going on. Well, maybe this is something I can get connected to. Because see, listeners and friends and viewers, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to give you information so that you can make up your mind about what you can do in this moment with that information that I provide. And because you listen, because you are willing to at least listen to what I have to say, I appreciate you a great deal. So thank you so much for joining me again for another episode of Darker Than Blue. Next week, I'm going to try to bring more voices who are from people who are engaged in this struggle and others connected around the world, because it is important for us to hear about the multiplicity of tactics of everyone involved in this liberation struggle. And some of those tactics are being carried out not here in the United States, but in other countries around the world engaged in the same struggle. So thank you for joining me on this week's Darker Than Blue. Those of you on Black Liberation Media and on Facebook and on Instagram, stick around, because yes, there is a dark room coming. But for those of you listening on WPFW FM on 89.3 on your radio dials, thank you for joining me this week. A luta continua, the struggle continues. But if we keep talking about the multiplicity of tactics that are available to us in this struggle, Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace.